The morning had started like any other. The sun peeked through the windows of the small restaurant, casting a warm glow over the wooden tables and polished floors. Outside, the city was already alive, with people rushing to work. Cars honking, and the occasional dog barking as its owner hurried along. Inside, the restaurant was quiet, almost sleepy, as the early customers trickled in. The aroma of freshly baked bread and brewed coffee filled the air. Making it a comforting place to start the day, the young server moved with practiced ease. Balancing a tray of orders as she made her way to a table near the window, her hands were steady, but her mind was far away. Thinking about the rent that was due, the bills piling up, and the endless list of things she had to take care of. She forced herself to smile as she greeted the customers, exchanging polite words and making sure everything was perfect. She had always been proud of her work, even when it was exhausting and thankless. Her coworkers joked among themselves as they set up tables and prepared for the lunch rush. The young server laughed along, though it was half-hearted. She liked her coworkers, but sometimes their easy conversations reminded her of what she didn't have. She loved serving people, making them feel welcome and seeing their smiles. But behind her own smile was a layer of fatigue and worry that never quite went away as she wiped down a table. She noticed a group of regular customers talking quietly, glancing toward the door every few minutes. Curiosity got the better of her, and she moved closer to listen. "Did you hear?" one of them whispered. "A celebrity might be in town today. I think he's going to be around here." She paused, trying not to get too excited. "I heard it's someone really famous, but no one knows exactly where." Her heart skipped a beat. A celebrity in the city was rare. The thought that someone might come into the restaurant was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. She tried to push the idea out of her mind and focus on her work, but it lingered at the back of her thoughts, making her more aware of every movement she made. The morning continued slowly. With a steady stream of customers coming in for breakfast and early lunch, the young server took orders, carried trays, and refilled drinks, all while keeping her mind occupied with the possibility of a celebrity visit. She imagined what it would be like, trying not to dream too much. She reminded herself that celebrities were just people too, but the excitement in the restaurant made it hard to think logically as the clock ticked closer to noon. The restaurant started to fill up more quickly. The lunch rush was beginning, and the once quiet space was now alive with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of plates. The young server moved faster, carefully navigating the crowded floor. She tried not to let the stress show, but her shoulders ached from the constant movement, and her feet were sore. Still, she smiled at each customer, took orders with precision, and made sure every dish left the kitchen perfectly. The kitchen staff called out orders, their voices mixing with the background noise of the restaurant. The young server repeated each order to the diners, double-checking that nothing was missed. She prided herself on being thorough, knowing that attention to detail was what kept customers coming back. The regulars greeted her warmly, and she responded with the same warmth, feeling a small sense of accomplishment despite the weight on her mind. Then, something changed. The bell above the door rang, and everyone in the restaurant paused for a moment. It was just a sound, but it carried a different energy this time. People glanced toward the entrance, some whispering and pointing subtly. The young server's heart started to race, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. She didn't know why, but there was a feeling in the air that this day would be different. She went back to her duties, trying to focus on clearing tables and taking new orders. Her hands shook slightly, though she tried to hide it. Every movement felt more deliberate, more careful. She couldn't explain the nervous excitement bubbling inside her, and she forced herself to stay calm. The restaurant was busy, but the rhythm of the morning continued, each moment blending into the next. Then she noticed it. A man entered, tall and confident, with an aura that seemed to command attention without even trying. He moved casually, but there was something about him that made people stop and look. Whispers started circulating quickly among the staff and customers. The young server's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt her hands grow clammy. She tried to focus on her training, on taking orders and serving food. But it was hard to think clearly. Her coworkers nudged her quietly, just trying to hint at what was happening, but she already knew. She had seen him before in movies and interviews. He was the celebrity everyone had been talking about, the one people dreamed of meeting. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. She wanted to run and hide, but she also wanted to stay. To do her job well and not let her nerves get the better of her, the man approached the counter with a calm, friendly smile. He looked around, taking in the restaurant without rushing, as if he wanted to soak in the atmosphere. The young server felt her stomach twist with a mix of fear and excitement. She took a deep breath and walked toward him, trying to keep her hands steady and her voice normal. "Hello. Welcome," she said, forcing a polite smile. "Can I take your order?" He returned her smile, warm and genuine. "Yes, thank you," he said, his voice deep and kind. The words were simple, but they carried a reassurance that made her feel slightly more at ease. She nodded, listening carefully as he placed his order. Her hands still trembled, but she repeated it back slowly, making sure she got everything right. He nodded in approval, noticing her attention to detail and the effort she was putting into her work as she moved to prepare his tray. She felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Excitement, nervousness, and a strange sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, this moment could change her day. She had worked in restaurants for years, serving countless people, but this encounter felt different. It wasn't just a customer. It was someone who carried a story of success and perseverance. Someone whose presence seemed to make the ordinary restaurant feel extraordinary. The young server returned with the tray, placing each item carefully in front of him. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced herself to appear composed. "Here's your order," she said softly. "I hope everything is to your liking." He looked at the food and then back at her, his eyes kind and attentive. "Thank you," he said again, with that same warmth in his voice. She felt a small wave of relief wash over her, as if his kindness had eased some of the tension in her chest. She stepped back, trying to maintain a professional distance while secretly stealing glances at him. He seemed relaxed, enjoying the moment without any pretense. The restaurant continued its rhythm around them, but for her, time seemed to slow down. Every gesture, every word, felt significant. She had prepared for a busy lunch, but nothing could have prepared her for the emotional weight of this encounter. As she went back to attend other tables, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening. It wasn't just about serving a celebrity. It was about being seen, recognized, and treated with genuine kindness. She thought about her life, her struggles, and how small moments like this could have a lasting impact. Her mind raced, imagining how the rest of the day might unfold. But she tried to stay grounded, focusing on her work and the customers around her. The morning turned into early afternoon, and the restaurant was in full swing. Orders flew from the kitchen, trays were carried to tables, and the hum of conversation filled the space. The young server moved efficiently, her body tired but her spirit lifted by the unexpected encounter. She smiled at her coworkers, who noticed the change in her demeanor. There was a spark in her eyes, a sense of hope and excitement that hadn't been there before. Despite the busy environment, she couldn't help but steal another glance at the celebrity. He was calm, eating his meal, occasionally glancing around and enjoying the atmosphere. She noticed small gestures of kindness in the way he interacted with the staff and other customers, and it struck her deeply. It was rare to see someone so famous act with such genuine humanity, and it reminded her of the power of simple, heartfelt actions. The young server finished her shift with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her feet ached, her body was sore, but her mind was buzzing with thoughts and emotions. She had experienced something she would never forget, a moment that felt both surreal and deeply meaningful. She knew the day was far from over, and she wondered what might happen next. The restaurant, once ordinary, now felt full of possibility and unexpected surprises, and she couldn't wait to see how the story would unfold. As the lunch rush began to calm down, she took a brief moment to catch her breath and reflect. She thought about the customers she had served, small gestures of kindness exchanged, and the unexpected encounter that had made her day unforgettable. She realized that life was full of surprises, and sometimes the most ordinary days could turn into extraordinary memories. She smiled to herself, feeling a quiet sense of gratitude for the experience. knowing that this was just the beginning of a day that would be remembered for a lifetime. The restaurant was buzzing with activity when the young server noticed something unusual. The door opened again, and in walked a man who carried an air of confidence and warmth. At first, she thought it might be another customer. But something about the way he moved, the calm certainty in his steps, the presence he radiated, made her heart skip a beat. She knew instantly it was him, the celebrity they had all been whispering about. Vin Diesel had entered the restaurant without warning. Her mind raced. She had seen him in movies, on television, and in interviews, but seeing him in person, so close and ordinary, was something entirely different. The hum of the restaurant seemed too quiet in her ears as she watched him take a few steps inside. He looked around casually, appreciating the atmosphere without rushing. People nearby started whispering, their voices tinged with excitement and disbelief, but she tried to remain professional. Her hands felt clammy, and she gripped her notepad tightly. Trying to steady herself, she approached him carefully, her steps light and deliberate. She had served many customers before, but none had made her feel this mix of nerves and awe. "Hello," she said softly, forcing a calm smile. "Welcome. Can I take your order?" Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the storm of emotions she was trying to hide. Vin Diesel turned to her with a warm smile. "Hi, thank you," he said in a voice that was surprisingly gentle and grounded. There was a kind of ease in the way he spoke, a softness that made the young server feel slightly more at ease. She nodded, writing down his order carefully, double-checking every detail. Her hands still trembled slightly, but she focused on her task, reminding herself to stay professional as she moved toward the counter to get his tray. She felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she tried to take deep breaths to steady herself. Every small movement felt magnified. Every glance toward him carried weight. She reminded herself that he was a person, just like anyone else. But the reality of being this close to someone so famous made it difficult to think clearly. Back in the kitchen, she prepared the order with careful attention. Each dish was placed on the tray neatly, the presentation clean and precise. She wanted everything to be perfect, not just because he was famous, but because she took pride in her work. As she carried the tray to his table, she felt the eyes of the other customers on her, and her nerves grew stronger. She was about to serve someone who had inspired millions, someone who seemed larger than life. And now he was right in front of her. Placing the tray on the table, she tried to keep her hands steady. "Here is your order," she said, her voice a little stronger than before. "I hope everything is to your liking." He looked up at her, his eyes kind and attentive. "Thank you," he replied warmly. It was such a simple exchange, yet it had an impact that she couldn't fully explain. The sincerity in his voice made her feel seen, acknowledged, and respected. For a moment, the restaurant seemed to fade away around her. She focused entirely on him, noticing small details, the way he smiled, the relaxed posture, the gentle tone of his voice. She realized he wasn't just a celebrity. He was a person who treated others with respect and kindness. It was rare to see someone so famous carry themselves with such humility, and it struck her deeply. She wanted to say more, to share a little about herself, but she wasn't sure if it was appropriate. The customers continued their meals, the restaurant's rhythm returning slowly, but her attention remained on the table where he sat. She noticed the small gestures he made, the way he nodded to the kitchen staff, the polite thank yous, the appreciation in his eyes. He didn't act rushed or impatient. He was present, enjoying the moment, and it made her feel calm in an unexpected way. For someone who had spent years worrying about her own struggles, this simple act of attentiveness was inspiring. As she checked on him, she accidentally knocked over a small utensil. It clattered to the floor, and in that instant, her emotions overwhelmed her. Her face flushed, and before she could stop herself, tears began to well up in her eyes. She quickly tried to blink them away, feeling embarrassed, but he noticed immediately. Vin Diesel stopped eating and looked up at her, concern evident in his expression. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. His voice was gentle, not condescending, and it startled her. She wanted to explain herself, to tell him about the stress of her life, the worries she carried, and the small victories and defeats of her everyday existence. For a moment she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that was both frightening and relieving. The tears she had been holding back spilled quietly. She let herself feel the weight of the day. Vin Diesel didn't react with surprise or discomfort. Instead, he gave her a reassuring smile, leaning slightly forward in his seat. "It's all right," he said. "Take your time." The words were simple, but they carried a depth of empathy that touched her profoundly. She felt seen, not as a server, not as a background character in his world, but as a human being with struggles, feelings, and a story of her own. She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes discreetly, and tried to regain her composure. He didn't rush her, didn't make her feel small. He just waited patiently, showing a level of understanding and kindness that was rare in her life. The room seemed to hold its breath as this small interaction unfolded. Other staff and customers noticed the moment. A shared recognition of something genuine happening between a celebrity and someone whose life was far from glamorous. As she regained her composure, she began to speak, her voice soft but steady. She shared a little about her day, about how busy it had been, and about the long hours she worked to make ends meet. She didn't go into details about her personal struggles, but she allowed herself to be honest in a way that was simple and human. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, his attention fully on her. His demeanor made her feel safe, and she realized how rare it was to meet someone who could be so famous, yet so approachable. Vin Diesel responded with encouragement, sharing small words of wisdom and kindness. He spoke about hard work, perseverance, and the importance of finding joy in small moments. The young server felt a sense of calm wash over her, as if his presence alone was enough to lighten some of the burdens she carried. It was not a grand gesture or a headline-making act. It was simple, human connection, and it had a profound impact. The interaction continued as she checked on him periodically, bringing extra napkins, refilling his drink, and making sure he had everything he needed. Each time she approached, he smiled, making her feel appreciated and valued. It was a rare experience, one that made her forget for a moment about the stress, bills, and worries that filled her life. She felt seen, acknowledged, and understood in a way that few people had ever made her feel. As he finished his meal, the young server felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, relief, and a renewed sense of hope. She had not only served a celebrity, but had shared a genuine human connection. A brief moment of understanding that transcended status, fame, and daily struggles. She realized that life could be unpredictable, and that extraordinary moments could happen in the most ordinary places. The lunch rush began to ease, and the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The young server felt a sense of fulfillment, an emotional release that she hadn't anticipated. She had navigated her nerves, interacted with someone she admired deeply, and had been treated with unexpected kindness. The day had shifted from ordinary to remarkable, and she knew that the memory of this moment would stay with her forever. As she reflected on the encounter, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. She realized that life's challenges, while heavy, could be softened by simple acts of understanding and compassion. Vin Diesel had walked into the restaurant without warning, but the impact of his presence was undeniable. It reminded her that even brief, fleeting interactions could carry profound meaning, and that the human connection she had experienced was a gift she would carry forward in her life. The restaurant had returned to its usual rhythm after the initial surprise of Vin Diesel's presence. But for the young server, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Her heart still raced with the memory of the brief, understanding exchange they had shared. She tried to focus on her duties, taking orders and serving customers. But a strange mix of excitement and nervous energy stayed with her. Each step she took felt lighter, as if the encounter had shifted something inside her. Vin Diesel sat at his table quietly, sipping his drink and glancing around the restaurant. He was calm, composed, and approachable, the kind of presence that seemed to fill a space without overwhelming it. Every now and then, he would smile at someone passing by or nod to a staff member with acknowledgement. He was not just present in the restaurant physically. He was fully aware of the environment, observing the small details that often went unnoticed. The young server noticed how he interacted with others. She watched as he patiently responded to questions from the kitchen staff, thanked a customer who complimented the meal, and offered a kind word to a child who had dropped a spoon. It struck her that fame had not hardened him. Rather, it seemed to have made him more aware of the impact a simple gesture could have. She felt a wave of admiration and inspiration, realizing that genuine kindness had the power to touch lives in ways far beyond wealth or recognition. As she approached his table to check on him again, her nerves returned. But this time they were mixed with anticipation rather than fear. "Is everything all right with your meal?" she asked softly. He looked up at her and smiled warmly. "Yes, it's wonderful. Thank you for taking care of everything." His words were simple, yet the sincerity behind them made her chest tighten with emotion. She nodded, trying to respond calmly, but inside, she felt a mix of relief and happiness. She stayed for a moment, chatting lightly to ensure he had everything he needed. Her conversation was careful, polite, but it also carried the authenticity of someone genuinely trying to connect. Vin Diesel responded with equal warmth, asking about the restaurant, the staff, and the atmosphere. His questions were genuine, showing a curiosity and interest in the ordinary world around him that surprised her. He didn't just ask for the sake of politeness. He truly wanted to know, and that made her feel valued in a way that few people ever had as they talked. The young server began to feel a shift in herself. The tears she had held back earlier seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She realized that this interaction, simple as it was, had reminded her of her own strength and resilience. She had navigated her nerves, served someone she admired, and had been met with empathy and understanding. It was a powerful reminder that moments of human connection could carry as much significance as any achievement or recognition. Vin Diesel noticed the subtle change in her demeanor and smiled. He leaned back slightly, maintaining eye contact with a calm, reassuring presence. "You're doing a great job," he said softly. "I can tell you care about what you do, and it shows." The young server felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words weren't just flattery. They were an acknowledgement of her effort, her dedication, and the unseen struggles she carried with her every day. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips, as the conversation continued. She found herself sharing more about her life, though carefully. She spoke of long hours, challenges at home, and the simple joys that kept her going. She didn't go into the deepest details of her struggles, but she allowed herself to be honest in the moment. Vin Diesel listened intently, never interrupting, his presence steady and grounding. It felt as though the weight she carried had been lightened, if only slightly. By someone who truly cared to listen, other staff and customers began to notice the interaction. Some glanced discreetly, intrigued by the unusual scene unfolding in the middle of the restaurant. It wasn't just a celebrity dining. It was a shared human experience, a rare glimpse of genuine connection. People whispered softly among themselves, touched by the authenticity of the moment. The young server, meanwhile, felt a mix of embarrassment and pride. She was aware of the attention, but Vin Diesel's calm demeanor helped her focus on the interaction rather than the crowd. At one point, a customer nearby asked for a menu suggestion, and Vin Diesel responded thoughtfully, offering a recommendation and even explaining why he liked that particular dish. It was not just about the food. It was the care he showed in the interaction. The young server watched quietly, feeling inspired by how effortlessly he made people feel seen and appreciated. It was a lesson in empathy, humility, and the power of paying attention to others. As the minutes passed, the young server returned to his table with small touches, refilling his drink, bringing extra napkins, checking if he needed anything else. Each time she approached, he greeted her with the same warmth and consideration, reinforcing her sense of being valued. She realized that this brief interaction was unlike any she had experienced before. It was not about fame or admiration. It was about being human, about recognizing another person's effort, and about sharing moments of understanding. The emotional intensity of the morning began to settle into a quiet, reflective calm. The young server felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the encounter, but for the lessons she was learning through it. She realized that kindness, attentiveness, and genuine curiosity could create moments that changed a person's day, perhaps even their outlook on life. She looked at Vin Diesel and saw someone who carried those qualities naturally, someone whose presence could make ordinary interactions extraordinary. He noticed her quiet observation and smiled knowingly. "You're thinking about a lot, aren't you?" he asked gently. She nodded, unsure how much to share, but feeling encouraged by his openness. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I think about the people I serve, the effort I put in, and sometimes I wonder if it matters." His eyes softened. "It matters more than you know. Every small act, every moment you care about, it has an impact." She felt a tear slip quietly down her cheek, this time not from fear or stress, but from the depth of understanding and connection she felt. He reached out slightly. Not in a way that was intrusive, but in a gesture of reassurance. "You're making a difference, even if you don't see it," he said. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that resonated deeply. She realized that she had been so focused on her own struggles that she hadn't acknowledged the positive influence she had on others through her work and presence. This moment helped her see herself in a new light. Time seemed to move differently as they continued to converse. She shared small stories from her life, and he responded with empathy and encouragement. It was a quiet exchange, but it was profound. The restaurant's usual noise faded into the background as they focused on the human connection unfolding between them. She felt understood in a way that transcended social status or fame, and that understanding left a lasting impression on her heart. When he finally stood to leave, he left not just with a satisfied appetite, but with a gesture that would linger in her mind. He thanked her personally, acknowledging her effort and kindness. The young server felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, awe, and a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. The encounter had shifted something inside her, leaving her with a renewed belief in the power of human kindness and understanding. As she watched him leave the restaurant, she felt a quiet sense of completion. The moment had been brief, yet it had left an imprint on her spirit. She realized that life was unpredictable, that extraordinary experiences could happen in the most ordinary settings, and that human connection was a powerful force. She returned to her duties with a new perspective, noticing the small gestures of kindness and appreciation around her, carrying forward the lessons she had learned in those remarkable moments. The rest of the afternoon passed with a calm energy, a sense of possibility lingering in the air. The young server continued her work with a lightness in her step, a spark in her eyes, and a quiet confidence that came from experiencing something genuinely transformative. She understood now that life's most impactful moments often came unexpectedly, in ways that could inspire, uplift, and remind someone of their own worth and strength. Vin Diesel had entered the restaurant without warning, but the effect of his presence and empathy would stay with her forever, shaping the way she approached her work, her life, and her interactions with others. The afternoon had settled into a rhythm, and the restaurant hummed with the quiet energy of customers enjoying their meals. For the young server, however, the day had taken on a new significance. The encounter with Vin Diesel earlier had left her with a lingering sense of warmth, hope, and unexpected confidence. Even though she continued with her work, each movement and interaction now carried a subtle lightness she hadn't felt before. There was a shift within her, a quiet understanding that simple acts of connection could have a profound impact. Vin Diesel remained at his table, slowly finishing his meal. He didn't rush, taking the time to enjoy the food and the atmosphere. His presence was calming, and she noticed how effortlessly he treated everyone around him with respect and attentiveness. It was inspiring to see someone so accomplished remain grounded and kind. She realized that his behavior wasn't just about politeness. It was an expression of his humanity, a reminder that no matter how high someone rose in life, the small gestures of empathy and care mattered most. As she approached his table with a fresh glass of water, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but this time it was mingled with anticipation and gratitude. "Is there anything else I can bring you?" she asked, her voice steady but gentle. He looked up, meeting her eyes, and smiled warmly. "No, thank you. Everything has been perfect," he said. "You've been wonderful."
Ow.
His words were simple, but carried weight. Reinforcing her sense of being seen and appreciated, the young server felt a rush of emotion. His acknowledgement was not just for the act of serving, but for the effort, care, and dedication she put into her work every day. She realized how much it mattered to be recognized, not for fame or status, but for the human effort and sincerity she brought to each interaction. She smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment and quiet pride that she hadn't felt in a long time. Vin Diesel's calm presence encouraged her to open up further. She began to share small pieces of her life, carefully choosing what to reveal. She spoke of her long hours, her financial struggles, and the dreams she held quietly in her heart. She didn't dwell on the hardships, but allowed herself to be honest, to let the conversation be a small bridge of understanding between them. He listened intently, never interrupting, his eyes full of empathy and encouragement. She felt a rare sense of relief, so sharing a bit of her story lifted a weight she had carried alone for years. Other staff members watched the interaction quietly. Struck by the authenticity of the moment, customers glanced over discreetly, noticing the unusual sign of famous actor engaging in genuine, heartfelt conversation with someone who served him. The atmosphere of the restaurant shifted subtly, infused with a sense of humanity and connection that went beyond the ordinary dining experience. The young server felt a mix of humility and awe. Understanding that this encounter was something she would remember for the rest of her life, Vin Diesel offered advice softly, not in a grand or condescending way, but as a friend might. He spoke about perseverance, kindness, and the importance of valuing the small moments in life. He encouraged her to take pride in her work and to recognize the impact she had on the people she served. His words were simple yet profound, resonating with her in a way that felt both comforting and empowering. She realized that this brief encounter was teaching her lessons she had long needed to hear. The conversation turned lighter as well, filled with small laughter and shared smiles. He asked her about her favorite meals at the restaurant, her experiences with customers, and even playful stories from the kitchen. These moments of levity balanced the deeper conversation, reminding her that human connection could be joyful and simple as much as it could be meaningful. She felt her nerves settle completely, replaced by a sense of ease and genuine engagement. At one point, a child at a nearby table dropped a utensil, and without missing a beat, Vin Diesel bent slightly to pick it up and hand it back with a warm smile. The young server observed this, noticing how naturally he treated everyone around him with respect and kindness, regardless of age, status, or situation. It was a powerful lesson in empathy, and she felt inspired to carry that same attentiveness into her daily interactions. Not just in the restaurant, but in life. As the afternoon wore on, the young server found herself reflecting on her own journey. She thought about the long hours, the challenges she faced, and the moments of doubt that often weighed heavily on her. Yet now, seeing the impact of a simple act of kindness and recognition, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that her work, though often unseen or underappreciated, mattered in ways she had never fully recognized. She realized that the human connection she shared with customers, the care she put into her service, and the authenticity she brought to each interaction could touch lives in meaningful ways. Vin Diesel noticed her thoughtful expression and smiled gently. "You're thinking about a lot," he said. She nodded, feeling a quiet courage to speak honestly. "I've always tried to do my best," she admitted softly. "Sometimes it feels like it doesn't matter, but moments like this remind me that it does." He nodded in understanding, his eyes conveying genuine respect and empathy. "Every effort matters," he said. "Every act of care leaves an impact, even if you don't see it right away." His words sank in deeply, leaving a lasting impression that went beyond the afternoon encounter. They continued to converse, sharing stories, laughter, and reflections. The young server felt a sense of connection that transcended the ordinary boundaries of their roles. He was a celebrity, yes, but at that moment, he was simply a person, someone who understood the value of attention, care, and empathy. She realized that these qualities, though often overlooked, held immense power to uplift and inspire, as Vin Diesel prepared to leave. He made a small gesture that meant more than words could express. He thanked her personally, acknowledging her effort, her dedication, and the warmth she brought to her work. The young server felt a profound sense of gratitude, her heart full of emotion. She realized that the encounter had not only touched her, but it also reminded her of the strength and resilience she possessed all along. The restaurant returned to its usual rhythm after he left. But the young server carried with her a transformed perspective. She approached her work with renewed energy, noticing the small gestures of kindness from customers, the smiles exchanged, and the quiet impact she had on those around her. She understood now that every interaction mattered, every moment of care could ripple outward, and that human connection was a force far more powerful than she had ever imagined. As the evening approached, she took a brief moment to reflect on the day. She thought about the unexpected visit, the heartfelt conversation, and the lessons she had learned about empathy, humility, and the significance of small gestures. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had been part of something meaningful, something that would stay with her forever. Vin Diesel's presence had been a catalyst, but the deeper understanding of connection and impact was hers to carry forward. The young server returned to her duties with a newfound sense of purpose. She greeted each customer with attentiveness, carried each tray with care, and approached every interaction with the awareness that even small actions could make a difference. The lessons of the afternoon, the importance of empathy, kindness, and genuine human connection were now embedded in her, shaping the way she moved through her work and her life. As the restaurant began to close for the day, she paused for a moment by the door, reflecting on the extraordinary events that had unfolded. She thought about the unexpected kindness, the shared understanding, and the transformative power of a single encounter. She realized that life often offered surprises, moments that could inspire, uplift, and remind someone of their own strength and value. Today had been one of those moments. She knew it would remain with her as a cherished memory for years to come. The young server smiled to herself, feeling a quiet sense of gratitude. She understood that true impact was not measured by fame or recognition, but by the authenticity, care, and empathy one brings to the world. Vin Diesel had walked into her life without warning, yet the lessons he imparted and the kindness he showed would continue to guide her, inspiring her to approach every day with the same attentiveness and humanity that had made this afternoon unforgettable. The day was slowly coming to a close, and the restaurant had settled into the soft quiet of evening. The sun had dipped lower, casting a warm orange glow through the windows, and the hum of the city outside was fading into a calmer rhythm. For the young server, however, the day had been anything but ordinary. She had experienced something that would remain etched in her memory forever, a moment of genuine human connection that went far beyond the normal flow of work as she moved among the remaining customers. Refilling drinks and clearing tables, her mind kept returning to the encounter with Vin Diesel. The way he had treated her with respect, kindness, and patience had left an impression that was impossible to ignore. She realized that this experience was more than just a brush with fame. It was a lesson in empathy. It's a kind of lesson that stayed with you, quietly shaped who you were. The young server's hands were steady as she carried a tray of desserts to a table. But inside she felt a sense of lightness that had not been there that morning. Her chest felt warmer, as though the weight of the day had been lifted slightly. She smiled at the customers, noticing their little gestures of appreciation, the nods, and the words of thanks. It all felt more meaningful now. Each interaction, a small thread in the tapestry of human connection. Vin Diesel had left, but his presence lingered. She thought about the encouragement he had given her, the words of understanding, and the genuine interest he had shown in her life. It struck her how rare such encounters were, and she felt grateful to have been part of it. The day had reminded her that kindness was not just an abstract idea. It was a living, breathing force that could be shared and felt deeply in even the briefest moments. As she paused near the counter to take a sip of water, her manager approached. "You did really well today," he said quietly, a note of admiration in his voice. "I could see how you handled yourself with grace, even when things got surprising." She nodded, smiling softly, feeling a quiet pride in her performance. Today had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding in ways she had never expected. The evening continued, and the last few customers began to leave. The young server took the time to clean her station thoroughly, organizing utensils and wiping down tables with careful attention. Each movement was deliberate, a reflection of the calm focus she now felt. The nervous energy that had accompanied her throughout the morning was replaced with a quiet confidence and a sense of inner peace. She had been tested by an unexpected situation, and she had handled it with grace and authenticity. As she stacked plates in the back, she thought back to the conversation with Vin Diesel. She remembered his encouragement, his gentle words, and the way he had acknowledged her efforts. It was a small gesture, perhaps unnoticed by the rest of the world, but for her, it carried enormous significance. It reminded her that recognition and kindness could be transformative, and that even brief encounters could leave lasting impacts on someone's life. She thought about her dreams and ambitions, the things she had put on hold, and the small goals she had quietly held in her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of possibility. She realized that challenges were part of life, but that every act of effort, every moment of care, and every kind word could contribute to a brighter path. The day had shown her that even small gestures of connection could ripple outward in ways she might never fully see. The young server also reflected on the lessons of humility and empathy she had witnessed. Vin Diesel had carried himself with a balance of confidence and kindness that was rare, and she found herself inspired to emulate it in her own life. She understood now that true strength was not measured by recognition or fame, but by the ability to treat others with respect, compassion, and genuine interest. Closing time approached, and the restaurant's lights dimmed slightly. The young server finished the final tasks, ensuring that everything was in order for the next day. She stood for a moment in the quiet dining area, taking in the space she had moved through all day at the tables, the chairs, and the soft glow of the lamps. The restaurant had been a stage for something ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. A place where human connection had transformed an otherwise normal day into something unforgettable. She thought about her coworkers, many of whom had observed the events, but might not have fully understood the depth of the experience. She smiled quietly, knowing that the lesson she had learned was hers to keep. It was a reminder of the power of empathy, the importance of paying attention, and the impact of even the simplest acts of kindness. The memory of the afternoon would continue to influence her, guiding the way she interacted with customers, colleagues, and anyone she met in her life as she turned to leave. She noticed a small note slipped onto the counter. It was from Vin Diesel, written on a simple card. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up, reading the few words of encouragement he had left, a reminder to continue caring, to keep believing in herself, and to recognize the impact she had on the people around her. Tears came to her eyes again. It's time from pure gratitude and the quiet joy of feeling understood and appreciated. The young server walked out into the evening, the city lights reflecting softly on the wet pavement. The day had been extraordinary, a mix of surprise, emotion, and insight that she knew would stay with her forever. She felt lighter, more confident, and inspired to approach her work and life with the same authenticity and empathy that she had experienced earlier. The ordinary world around her seemed a little brighter, a little more full of possibility, as if every small gesture of care could ripple outward, touch countless lives. She thought about the people she would meet in the coming days, the customers who might be struggling silently, and the colleagues who faced their own challenges. She resolved to approach each interaction with the awareness that her actions mattered, that her kindness could make a difference, and that the world could be a better place when people chose empathy and compassion. The afternoon had taught her that one person's presence, even for a brief moment, could inspire and uplift in ways that were profound and lasting. Walking home, she reflected on the entire experience of the nervousness, the tears, the laughter, and the heartfelt conversations. She realized that life was full of moments that could surprise, inspire, and change a person if they were open to them. Vin Diesel's visit had been unexpected, but it had left her with clarity, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that fame and recognition were fleeting, but the impact of genuine human connection was timeless. By the time she reached her apartment, she felt a quiet contentment. She thought about her family, her friends, and the life she was building through her own dedication and care. The day had shown her that even the smallest acts of kindness could have ripple effects that lasted far beyond the immediate moment. She smiled to herself, knowing that she would carry the lessons of this day in her heart, sharing them through her work, her interactions, and the way she approached every challenge in life. as she prepared for the next day. She reflected on the deeper meaning of the experience. The human connection she had shared, the empathy she had witnessed, and the inspiration she had received were gifts that would guide her moving forward. She understood that life's extraordinary moments often arrived without warning, but their impact could shape her perspective, her actions, and her sense of purpose forever. Vin Diesel had entered her world for a brief moment, and in doing so, he had left a lasting impression, a reminder that empathy, kindness, and genuine care were among the most powerful forces in life. The young server went to sleep that night with a sense of fulfillment. Knowing that the day had been transformative, she felt gratitude, hope, and a quiet strength, ready to face the challenges ahead with a renewed spirit. The restaurant, her work, and the human connections she fostered had taken on new meaning. And though the world would continue on with its usual rhythm, she carried within her the extraordinary lessons of a day that had begun like any other, but had ended as something truly unforgettable.